Howdy, howdy! We are live on a Friday night. Not just any Friday night, but Valentine's Day. So we have a very Valentine's themed show planned for everyone. And I am joined by my Valentine, Miss Taylor. But we are going to be talking about the romances of Star Trek, every Star Trek series. And I see that there's people watching. Hi, Jill, in the live chat. And there's some other eyes on us, so Taylor, I think they are ready for us to begin.
Alrighty.
I'm Fatheree.
And I'm Taylor.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 317th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek old and new. And tonight we are discussing the best and worst romances in the Star Trek franchise. So Taylor and I have gone through every Star Trek series, and we've come up with who we think are the best romance as well as the worst romance. And we're going to mention some honorable mentions, maybe some other... There's a lot of romance in Star Trek, actually.
Honestly, there's a lot.
I mean, some shows more than others. But I'm really looking forward to talking about this because not only are we going to share with y'all what we came up with, but we're going to reveal to each other. We both made this list of the best romances and worst romances of every Star Trek show independently. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what the other one has selected. I can guess on a few.
Yeah, I think I have an idea of what some of yours might be too.
There's probably going to be some overlap. We're going to have some that we might have both picked, but that's why we're going to have the honorable mentions as well, just so we can have more couples to talk about. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into this. We've been working on it all week. So before we do dive in, just a little bit of housekeeping per usual. I do want to give a big thank you and shout out to the wonderful Tex-Trek Patreon supporters. So thank you so very much. Starfleet Sohel, Cake is Eternal, Crazy Dutchie, Joanne Robertson, John Dot, Geek Filter, Quark Spar, Stephanie Durantes, Matthew Averett, Braxton, Chuck A, Joel Vallis, Benginium, Arthur Lamoureux, our associate producer, Chris Garris, Dave Farabee, and our anonymous supporters. And if you are watching us live tonight on Valentine's Day, you are in luck because I'm going to remind you that tomorrow, Saturday, February 15th at 3:30 p.m. Central, we will be having our monthly Patreon watch party. We like to celebrate with our patrons once a month with a watch party. And we're going to be watching the episode, actually, Picard Season 3, Episode 1. The Season 3 premiere opens with Dr. Crusher doing badass phaser rifle shit. So we're going to be watching Picard Season 3, Episode 1, The Next Generation. Actually, the name of the episode. Kind of confusing, because then, like, the series finale was The Last Generation, and then on like Lower Decks you have like the new next generation, and
yeah,
you know, obviously there's some TV show called The Next Generation. Right. So but yeah, we're gonna be watching Season 3 Episode 1 of Star Trek Picard, The Next Generation, 3:30 p.m. Central. And if you missed it, that's okay. We're going to be doing monthly watch parties every month. So to get into those, you can come into the Patreon as little as $2 a month. But if you can afford to be more generous, there are some additional perks as well. But yeah, looking forward to that. And also, if you're a Bridge Crew level patron or higher and you have a birthday in March, be sure to let me know, and we'll be having watch parties for that. That's another perk. If you come in at bridge crew or higher, then we'll have additional watch parties to celebrate birthdays. So it's always a fun gang who shows up at those. Um, but we do have a lot to talk about. So we broke this down to where there's like 11 series. We combined the animated series with the original series and those movies because it's the same characters, and we're counting the Kelvin movies as a series. But yeah, there's like 11 total categories. They're all of Legacy Trek, all of Modern Trek.
Right, and then 2 categories for each of those 11. So there's 22 slides to get through.
Yeah, so this is going to be, like I said, a big surprise to each of us because I don't know what Taylor has picked. She doesn't know what I've picked. So I'm really excited to get started.
Me too.
Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. So I have some notes here. Let me get those pulled up. Beauties of doing things live. Okay, Miss Taylor, I am ready if you're ready.
All right, and you're gonna do first for every best, and I'm gonna go first for every worst category.
Okay, sounds good. So starting off, we're gonna do the original series / the animated series / the motion picture through Star Trek 6. But here we go.
Are you ready?
We're going to reveal each other what we've picked, but also I want to remind people that if you're watching live in the live audience, chime in and let us know who you think is the best romance in the original series, the animated series, and the TOS movies. But we're going to reveal ours right now.
All right, here we go.
So here we go. So looks like Miss Taylor has selected Kirk and Spock. Some of mine are going to be deeper cuts. A lot of the romances I've picked in this are, single episode characters, but I went with Pike and Vina. And we both have like a couple of honorable mentions. I love your honorable mention.
Thank you. So I went with Kirk and Spock, and then my honorable mention is Spock and Joxine.
Right, from the episode The Cloud Minders.
Oh, sorry. The Cloud Minders. Not Miners.
I said Minders.
Oh, okay.
It's a soft D.
I really loved that episode. I actually liked Kirk and the other woman as well. I forget her name. But I really liked Spock and Joxine in that episode.
Oh, yeah, the miner woman. Yeah, she's a cool character. But my honorable mention is Kirok and Miramani from the Paradise... this side of... Paradise Syndrome. I get those mixed up all the time. But this is when, for people who don't remember, when Captain Kirk got hit on the head and thought he was a Native American and lived like this whole Native American life and fell in love with the woman Miramani, and they almost had a baby together until some tragic events unfolded. But he seemed like so happy with her. I know there's some things in that episode that have aged poorly, but I've always bought into the admittedly cheesy romance in there. But let's talk about like our top picks. I'll go first on the best romances.
Okay.
But I went with Pike and Vina from The Cage and The Menagerie. But the reason why I chose them is because I love that being the ending of Captain Pike's story. Now that we're getting all of this backstory with Pike and Discovery and Strange New Worlds, I love the idea of even though he thinks that he has like this cursed fate of ending up in the wheelchair from the Delta radiation, but he's still going to carry out his role to save those cadets. And as a result of that, he doesn't know that he's going to be rewarded, but like it ends up being a happier ending than he thinks. He thinks he's going to be condemned to hell, basically. But instead, it's basically he gets to live in paradise. He gets to live with his love, like him and Vina. Like it was kind of an arranged marriage, but they did seem to actually have like genuine romantic sparks, especially when we see Talos 4 come back in Star Trek Discovery season 2. And so he gets to like live his fantasy life with this woman who also has her body is kind of broke down and destroyed, but it doesn't matter. Like even without their physical bodies, and I say this in kind of a secular way, but like their souls can still like find love for one another. But that's what I went with my number one. But you chose Kirk and Spock.
Yes, I was actually really nervous to put that as my top best romance, but I mean, I think it's very romantic, like very coded that way. But I also can see people like finding them as like a bromance or like more of like friends, which I think is totally fine. But there's a couple of scenes that really stood out that was so romantic that I was like squealing when we were watching it. And this picture obviously is from one of them in The Wrath of Khan. And then also again, I believe it's in the fifth movie. I don't remember, but there's like scenes where they're just like so in tune with each other, and like Spock is so dedicated to Kirk and vice versa, and I just love that dynamic. Like they'll do anything for each other, and I love that. Um, yeah, so I don't know if there's anything more I want to share, but I was nervous about putting that up there since it's not canon.
That's not that controversial of a take. A lot of people. I mean, I don't read Kirk and Spock as lovers, but I know a lot of people do, and it's okay if people do read it that way. But yeah, that's not going to be controversial at all.
Okay.
So Taylor, just to remind everyone out there, you're new to the Trek fandom. You watched all of Star Trek in a 12-month period with me. But now you've seen it all, and you have like these opinions, so it's cool to finally start sharing these.
Yeah, I think that was actually something I struggled with when we were picking like our worst and best romances. Is I've only seen pretty much everything once through, so like I'm excited to go through this and see if you have any like deep cuts that I'm going to be refreshed and stuff, because I think a lot of mine are going to be more mainstream.
Yeah, some of mine are gonna be a little esoteric, but that's okay. Do you have any things you want to say about Spock and Droxine while you chose that particular pairing?
Yeah, I really loved how romantic Spock was with her in this episode. I thought he was a little out of character, but I think it worked really well. Like he called her a work of art, like when they first met, and I was swooning over that. I really loved how, she's very like justice and law and balance and stuff. And I think they just had a really good, chemistry and a lot to talk about, like a lot in common. And I thought it was really cool to see those things like come out in their conversations.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I know at the time that episode ruffled a lot of feathers because people were like, "Oh, this is so out of character for Spock." But I always think it's fun to watch them on screen together.
Yeah.
And then I had to go with Kirok and Miramani for my honorable mention because I have a soft spot for that episode, but some other runner-ups that didn't make it. I also thought about Dr. McCoy and his love interest from For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky, Natira, because it's like the one time that Dr. McCoy gets the girl instead of Kirk.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun one. But any other thoughts on these romances, or any other runner-ups you want to mention before we go to worst romances in the original series, animated series, or first 6 films?
So I actually had Pike and Vina as an honorable mention originally, and I changed it. So I'm glad to see you put them up there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, this allows us to like cover it a little bit more. There were a couple of times where I almost went like, I shouldn't go with this because I'm pretty sure Taylor's gonna pick it and we'll end up talking about it anyways.
Oh well.
But let's move on to who we've selected as our worst romances in the original series, animated series, and the first 6 films. So,
all right.
I
get to go first. So my worst was Spock and Chapel.
Well, say what like both of them are before we talk about them.
Okay. Well, my worst was Spock and Chapel from the animated series.
Yeah, and I went with Kirk and Janice Lester. From the very final episode of the original series to air, Turnabout Intruder, the infamous episode where Kirk and his ex, Janice Lester, switch bodies. And she's like impersonating him, trying to be captain of the Enterprise.
Yeah,
in our honorable mentions, I see you have Scotty and Uhura from Star Trek V.
Yeah.
That fleeting romance. Who do I have as my honorable mention?
So your honorable mention is Khan and Marla McGivers.
Yeah, or McGivers, I think is how they say it. But
Marla McGivers.
Yeah, or is it MacGyver's now? Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not
But
sure.
there's some I have some issues with that romance, how it was depicted. But yeah, let's hear why you think Spock and Chapel in the animated series is the worst.
Yeah, well, anything involving mud and romance is probably not a great start to a romantic relationship. I thought in the original series, like the live action, there was some like, you know, romance between Chapel and Spock that was kind of explored, and she was rejected by him a couple times there. And in this episode, where she basically like drugs Spock,
Yeah.
is incredibly bad. And definitely don't want to condone that kind of, action. So this was extremely cringy for me, and I did not like it.
Yeah, and that's understandable. It's going to be interesting to see how Strange New Worlds plays out because they dabble with the Spock and Chapel stuff, and so it's going to be real interesting to me when Strange New Worlds is said and done, how that lines up with what ends up happening in the animated series.
Yeah.
But my worst romance, Kirk and Janice Lester, partly because I really dislike the story. I
Yeah.
really dislike Turnabout Intruder. But yeah, just the idea of his ex being that psycho, and the whole idea of like women commanding starships being this like taboo thing. I know we have like the retcon now. Gene Roddenberry was saying like, no, she was just cuckoo. But I just don't like that relationship. All of Kirk's other old flames, he was like pretty cool with, and then like with that one, she was uh like the antagonist of the story, and they didn't really treat any of his other exes like that in the original series, which I always thought was like kind of cool. So did not like Kirk and Janice Lester. Um, our honorable mentions. Why was the Scotty and Uhura one your honorable mention?
Okay, I put this in here. No hate on Scotty and Uhura, honestly, but I didn't like that it was developed off screen and on beat for only like a few minutes in this one movie and not
It's weird,
explored
yeah.
more. Like, I think it's weird. There was nothing leading up to this. Like, in my opinion, that was like, oh, this is going to happen eventually or whatever. It really felt like male writers just trying to give Uhura a love interest and was like, oh, well, who can we give her? So there was that. For me, it was just kind of off-putting. Um, and tell me about yours. So your honorable mention again is Khan and Marla
MacGyver's.
MacGyver's.
But well, no, I'm doubting myself if that's not right. But yeah, just the way that Khan is such a jerk, and I know like he's supposed to be presented as like this like archaic, romanticized strong man from the past, but it's like some of his dialogue. I mean, he's like, "Such men take what they want,"
Yeah.
and then like when he like gets mad at her, and he's like, "Oh, now you must ask for permission to stay in my presence." It's just like I hate that works on her, that like wins her over. Like I hate that Khan having like that very toxic approach is kind of rewarded. Like she falls for him, and even at the end of the day, she chooses to stay with him on
Yeah.
SETI Alpha 5. So
Yeah.
I don't like that romance. It's embarrassing because Space Seed is such a quintessential episode to show people, people who watch The Wrath of Khan, widely considered the greatest Star Trek film ever, and they want like the full context of the story. So then they pull up Space Seed and they see that, and it's embarrassing to me. I don't like it.
Yeah, agree.
And I did see earlier in the live chat, Jill had a suggestion for best with Garth of Izar and Barda, right? Was her name? Sorry, scrolling in the comments, but I lost it.
Sorry. I was scrolling too.
And we do have some subspace transmissions we received in our Discord server. Joel said that Kirk in the Enterprise for best romance of the original series, so I can see that. Marta, thank you, Jill, for correcting me. Yeah, in the live audience, Jill mentioned Garth of Izar and Marta. So, I guess it is time to move on to the Next Generation and the TNG movies.
All right. Best romance for TNG.
Here we go. Oh, wow. So me and Taylor actually picked the exact same romance for the best romance in TNG, but we both went with Luoxana and Timothy.
Heck yeah. All right, and then for my honorable mention, it was Picard and Vash, and Fatheree's honorable mention is Worf and Troy.
Yeah. So,
You get to expand first.
well, part of what informed my choices was, okay, did I like buy the romance? Did I like believe the actors? Do I like seeing those characters together? But I think I was also kind of factoring in that the story. Do I like the story it was in? I think that kind of like helped me figure out how I rank these. And yeah, it is very sad. I see Rachel in the live audience is saying, "Oh, y'all must like to cry." But it is a very sad episode. Whenever people are like a full-on Luoxana Troy hater, I got to point out Half Alive is a great episode. But people who don't remember, Luoxana meets the scientist, Dr. Timothy. He's trying to save his planet. Their star is about to die and destroy their world. But they have a custom on their planet that at age 60 you have to they call it the resolution. You have to die. You have to commit suicide basically. And he has to die in order for his planet to continue the work that he started. They said if you try to run off with this Loxana woman and live, we're going to delete all of your research and it'll probably doom our world. Mm-hmm. But it's so sad to see him. It's also like a cool story. Like the older you get, I think I kind of appreciate it more. I feel like a lot of people probably have that same experience, but it's so sad to see him. He thinks he's like, oh, I'm this old worthless thing, but oh no, I actually have like a second chance at happiness, and life goes on, and like I can find love and happiness and joy, but then he ends up having to reject it to save his planet. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so this episode was really, really close to me when we watched it the first time. I mean, I was bawling, and then I had, it was the last episode we watched that day, and then I had to go to work. And it was on my mind for, a week. Even though we had kept watching, this one was so touching for me. And I really struggled with Luoxana in a few of her episodes, but this one, she shined so bright. And I loved, her finally kind of having this romance. She's always kind of, given these romantic storylines where she's so aggressive in her attack of her romantic interest that it's she's rejected, right? Because they don't want to be in a relationship with her. And I loved finally her having some reception. Yeah. And I think she deserved it. She just wants
she's
love.
A good catch for an older dude.
Yeah. And I felt like this was so, age appropriate and sweet, and he's kind. And it really kind of, brought her down to earth. I feel like they grounded each other really well. He needed to kind of be lifted up with her, carefree spirit and her sweetness. And, she's so energetic, right? And he kind of was, helping bring her back down a little bit. They kind of balance each other so well. And that was a big reason why I picked them. I really think about this episode and this couple a lot.
With our honorable mentions, I went with Worf and Troy. I always thought that was a cool romance to explore. I would have liked to have seen more of it. I would have loved to see more Troy and Alexander. They kind of had a little bit of. We never got to see her, full on stepmom mode, but she got along with Alexander really well. And it's kind of like the opposites attract kind of thing. They're probably the two most opposite characters on the TNG cast. And it's something that a lot of people I hear in more recent years talk about oh, that would have been cool if they explored that more. Because they kind of just, they set it up in season 7 and then the show ends and they just drop it, never to be mentioned again. So, yeah. I love the stuff that we get with both Worf and Troy end up with, I think, who they meant to be with after that. So I can't be too upset about it, but I'm glad that it was in there. I'm glad that it exists in TNG. But you went with Picard and Vash as your honorable mention.
So I'm a really big fan of Picard and Bev too, but that's always push and pull, and they never really want to commit. And I loved this episode, The Captain's Holiday, I believe, because I felt we kind of didn't have as much of an adventurous Picard. He's a workaholic, and then forcing him to go on vacation to Risa, and he was so grumpy about it the whole time, and ends up finding someone who has similar interests as him and is really fun and spontaneous and like kind of makes him break out of his shell. Like I thought she was so good for him in this episode, like to like, you know, force him to go on an adventure and like take a break from work for real, you know? And it was just a fun story, like with the Ferengi in this episode. Like it was just entertaining. And I think I just felt like Picard had a good time, you know? And I think Vosh had a good time with Picard too. Like it was just lighthearted for them. And I think that love should be joyful. And I felt that in this episode specifically.
I should point out that also in our subspace transmissions, Central Coast Foodie on Twitter said, the actor who played Vosh actually had an affair with Patrick Stewart, which subsequently destroyed his first marriage, per his autobiography. I didn't actually fact check that, and I hadn't heard that story before, but maybe that is true. So that's interesting. But I had some other runner-ups that I almost put as my honorable mention. I considered Wesley Crusher and Ashley Judd's character from The Game.
I had that as my runner-up too.
And I also thought of Picard and Commander Darren in Lessons.
Okay.
When he tried to date a crew member, and then that didn't work out too well. But I liked that romance. I thought that was interesting to explore.
Cool.
So, but with that being said, enough about the good romances in TNG. What do we think are the worst romances in TNG?
Here we go.
So revealing to each other for the first time. And we did it again. This is going to be a boring show if we keep picking the same thing. But no, I love it. We both went with Geordi and Leia Brahms as the worst romance in TNG. And then our honorable mentions.
All right. Mine is Tasha and Data.
That's understandable.
And Fathere's is Troy and Ves Alcar.
Yeah, from the episode Man of the People. That was the guy who was kind of being a psychic parasite on women, and Troy was his latest victim. Just because I hate the way that Troy was treated so much in TNG, and kind of the victim of so many like telepathic assault type stories. And,
yeah.
And yeah, I think that's like the biggest yuck out of all of them. I mean, I wasn't gonna put like Shinzon on here as like a romance, so. But yeah, Ves Alcar, F that guy.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Geordi and Brahms. You go first.
All right. Well, I feel like this one is kind of self-explanatory, but Geordi, like, creating this holographic Leah Brahms to help him with the scientific, like, I can't remember the exact details. I didn't review that, but...
Well, it was the first time it's in the episode Booby Trap.
Yeah, this is the one I'm talking about. Yeah, Booby Trap was terrible. Like, I liked the idea of, like, oh, let's have, like, this AI existence of the doctor's notes so I can, like, bounce ideas off of. That's cool. But then he decides that he's going to have a romantic, like, thing with this Leah Brahms hologram. But the problem is that Dr. Brahms is alive as a real person, like separate from this hollow person. And I'm like, that is weird, because now you have like this holographic like idea of a person, and you're like, there's a real life person out there like that doesn't know that you exist, and you're like, using her as like your love interest. It's gross.
It's like he creates a deep fake AI sex mannequin of a woman and then makes out with it.
Yeah, it's so creepy. So, yeah. So, and then, of course, later, whenever he meets the real Leah Brahms, it gets worse, because he's, like, expecting to be, like, have these, like, romantic things, and then, you know, she's married and not interested in him, and he is kind of an asshole, like, that whole episode to her. So, yeah, not a big fan.
And I just want to point out, I see in the live audience, Cake is Eternal is shouting out Troy and the Negotiator with the piercing blue eyes was disturbing. I think, is she talking about the character from the Bartizan Wormhole episode with the Ferengi? But that one was like, I just didn't like buy the chemistry of the actors, but it didn't make my skin crawl like Leia Brahms or Ves Alcar did.
Yeah. So for my honorable mention, I had Tasha and Data, and I don't really want to dive deep into this, but my main issue was that it was in this like weird episode where everyone's not themselves, right?
Yeah, the the naked now.
Yes. But my problem was that it kept coming up throughout the series where Tasha is his special person. And I thought that was so creepy. Like, he has that hologram of her, which I think is fine, like, in the friendship terms, but I felt like they kept pushing it like, oh, they were a really big thing. And I thought that was so weird and gross to, like, keep bringing it up. Like, all the way even into, like, the last season, like, I think that came up. And I just thought it was odd because I didn't see them, like Data, like, especially in the beginning and like season 1 isn't having like this emotional chip thing, so like he's very android, and it's so odd that they like really push this like as a romantic thing throughout the whole series, like, I think.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to say on Vez Alcar, just other than go watch Man of the People and tell me you don't hate that guy. So, to be fair, it was written to be like a bad romance, but I still hate the way that the story was handled anyways. Yep. But enough about TNG. Let's move on to DS9. So here we go. Okay, this hasn't surprised me at all.
Okay.
But this is 3 in a row. We've picked the same one. But Deep Space Nine, we both agree the best romance in that entire show is Worf and Jadzia Dax.
Yes, easily. Do we want to expand? Why do you want to expand, or do you want me to expand?
Well, before we get into that, let me just mention our honorable mentions. You went with Jadzia and Lenara Khan, which is great. I almost went with that. But mine is also like a one-off relationship from a single episode. It is Quark and Natima, his Cardassian old flame from the episode Profit and Loss. And she was part of the dissident movement on Cardassia, before we get into the Dominion War and stuff, but she was part of that revolutionary group, her and her students. But I love that brief Quark romance that we get in that episode. But yeah, enough about that. Jadzia and Worf. I mean, they just... Everyone... Who doesn't like that relationship? Well, I guess if I say that, someone out there will be like, I don't.
Yeah. I loved it. I loved how like aggressive the episode was, that this one from my picture, which is searching for Parmakai in all the wrong places, I think is the title. But I loved that episode so much, where they're like fighting and there's like all this sexual tension. Like, I was really rooting for them in that episode. And then when they got together, I was like worried they were going to break them up so much. Like, every time it was like a Jadzia and Worf focused episode, I was like, oh my gosh, if they break up, I'm going to be really upset. Because we came off of TNG where it was like, we were getting a lot of hot and cold episodes with, like, there wasn't a lot of long-term romance. And so I was worried Deep Space Nine was going to do the same thing with this couple. And I was so glad to see that all the way through. And like, I was crying when Jadzia died, and like Worf is screaming and, howling over her body essentially. Like, I was distraught. And so the whole arc for them, I think, was just so good.
Yeah, from like the first moment they met, when Kira and Jadzia, they were playing on the holosuite. They were dressed up like Maid Marian, or no, it was like King Arthur, but anyways, and when Kira's like, I normally don't dress like this, but like Jadzia says something to him in Klingon, and I think it was actually the translation is, he's like, oh, you're like the new host of like the Great Dax, like Curzon, and then Jadzia says like, yeah, but I'm a lot better looking, and like from that moment on, like they had like this undeniable chemistry between the two of them that the writers really used very well, and I think that relationship was paced out very well. And it is kind of a shame that we didn't get to see like another year of it in season 7, but you do feel that loss. I mean, it is impactful when Jadzia dies. I kind of wish it was like a little bit better than like, oh, she just happened to be there when Gul Dukat showed up and just got in the way. But you definitely buy the change that does to Worf's character going into season 7.
Yeah.
With Quark and Natima, just the thing I want to add on that is, I love when Quark is like, I would give up the entire bar to be with you. I'll give it to my brother, even though he'll like run it into the ground in a week. But like that's when you know, like, oh, he is like serious. Like this like greedy little creature that only
Yeah.
cares about profit.
Yeah.
Is like proud of that, but he's willing to like give it all up for this one woman. I really bought it. Like Armin Shimmerman sold that. Uh, but I see in the live audience, Aaron mentioned that he would have gone with Quark and Grilka, and that's one of my runner-ups I want to mention. There's so much romance in DS9 though, like Cisco and Cassidy Yates is another great one.
Love them.
So,
And Odo and Kira, I rooted for them. And Odo and Luoxana, even though that wasn't completely romantic, but they did get married for the protection of her.
Oh, yeah.
I loved that episode, too. I thought that was a really good Luoxana episode. And her with him in the elevator when he melts into her skirt.
Yeah, when they could be vulnerable in front of each other. And, like, she took off her wig.
Yes, I love that. I love when Luoxana is vulnerable like that. She's so gentle and like really relatable, and I love that.
The second best use of Luoxana after Half a Life is her DS9 stories.
Yep, agree.
And your honorable mention, Jadzia and Lenara Khan. For those who don't remember, this was they were married in past Trill lives. This is also the first time we see a same-sex kiss in Star Trek.
Yeah,
which was overdue. It's something like Roddenberry was pushing for in the late 80s.
Yeah.
But you have any comments you want to make on this? Was also one that was in my my runner-ups. This and also Garrick and
Julian.
Yeah. But tell us about Jadzia and Lenora.
Yeah, so I picked this because I was very happily surprised that it happened at all. I did not know that there was going to be like representation this early in Star Trek. And I really rooted for them. Like, their chemistry was so good in this. And I thought it was going to be queer baiting, to be honest. I didn't think anything was going to happen. I mean, obviously, they don't stay together. But I really loved, like, that taboo. Like, we're not supposed to even talk to each other because we knew each other in past lives thing. Like, it just felt very, like...
There was a good, like, social allegory.
Yeah.
A little heavy-handed, but Star Trek often is.
Yeah. But I loved it, and I thought that they acted so well together, and I just thought it was very unique and refreshing, honestly, for like what year was this?
96, I think.
Yeah, amazing. And then I did want to bring up one of my runner-ups was Garrick and Julian, but I didn't put it in here because it's not canon, so I didn't feel like I wanted to do a whole lot of
it's not canon until a different show.
Yeah, but even then it's like hollow Julian, so I don't know.
Cassie Mack in Discord also mentioned Jadzia Dax and Lenora Khan and rejoined. And speaking of Deep Space Nine, Chuck A in the Discord mentioned Worf and Jadzia, so I knew that was going to be a popular one. I almost didn't even put it on my list because I knew someone was going to bring it up, but like I just had to be like, well, that is obviously the best. I'm trying to say what the best romance is. Chuck A also suggested Kira and Odo, but I thought this was interesting. This will kind of transition into our worst romances, but... Joanne in the Discord said that Kira and Odo would be her candidates for worst romance. And she goes on to say, I don't think they had any romantic chemistry, either in universe or in real life. I think it would have been more effective if Kira didn't reciprocate Odo's feelings romantically, but they still had to navigate being friends. I've heard other people mention that. I actually like buy into that romance pretty well, but why don't we go ahead and move on to the worst romances in Deep Space Nine? What did we think were the worst?
Here we go.
So we both have Gul Dukat.
We hate him.
But do you want to read these?
Sure. Okay, so for my worst romance in Deep Space Nine, I put Gul Dukat and Kai Wynn. Fatheree has Gul Dukat and Kira Maru.
Yeah, so Kira's mom, I hate that so much.
I was really close to putting that in there as well. That was one of my runner-ups. Horrible.
And I can understand wanting Gul Dukat and Kai Wynn to be like, labeled the worst romance, but I actually enjoy that because I think they're such terrible people that I think they deserve each other there at the end. So
I was just having a hard time because every time they were being like kissy and loving on screen, I wanted to like throw up. So that's like the only reason I really put it on here, is I had such a physical negative reaction to this relationship. Yeah, so.
And then with our runner-ups, with our honorable mentions, you went with Ezri and Julian. Interesting. I also have a Dax in mind, but my honorable mentions were Jadzia and the character Dural, who he's very easy to forget, so I can understand if anyone out there doesn't remember who I'm talking about, but it's the episode Meridian. It's like the Scottish village Brigadoon, where it's like the planet shows up once every so many years and then goes back away, and Jadzia meets this guy, has like no chemistry with him, but just after like eating lunch with him and going for a walk in the park, she's like, I actually want to spend the rest of my life with this guy, and I'm gonna stay here and phase out with the planet. And, I do not. You know, a lot of people love to compliment Jonathan Frakes' directing, but even like Frakes as a director could not get believable performances out of these actors that they were in love. Like, I totally do not buy it.
It's terrible. He's so basic. Like, and Jadzia is so interesting.
Yeah.
So it was a horrible match. Yeah, agree with you on that one. For my honorable mention, I put Ezri and Julian, and I was scared to put this one down because I think a lot of people were really rooting for Julian and Ezri here. But the reason I don't like it is because he was pursuing Jadzia for so long with rejection, and I hated that it felt like here, we'll just give Julian what he wants in season 7, which is Dax, basically, but like Dax reincarnated. And I just didn't super buy it. Like, I also felt like Ezri was so young. Like, it was really hard for me to like see her in any romantic setting because I just
kind
see
of
her
closer,
as like a kid.
Closer in age to like Jake or Nog.
Yeah, and so I felt like it was kind of creepy to put her, you know, into a romantic relationship with someone who, one, had romantically pursued her previous host, and two, was, I think, a lot older than her. So, I mean, there's like, age gap is okay, but I just felt like it was a little creepy.
I disagree with you on that one. I like Julian and Ezri getting together, but I understand like your reasons for not liking it. The reason why I like it is because I feel like he matures and his behavior improves, and so I kind of like him being like rewarded then. But there's still kind of like some problems with that.
Yeah, because woman is not a reward.
Yeah,
like having a romance with her, like that shouldn't be a reward that the writers give him, in my opinion.
But I like that the show ended with like those characters in like a happy place. But do you want to talk more about Dukat and Kai Wynn?
I sure do not.
Well, just. I love Deep Space Nine season 6, but I don't like saying this in Star Trek unless like I really mean it, saying that I hate something. But I hate the episode Wrong's Darker Than Death or Night, or I think I got that right. But yeah, I hate Gul Dukat and Kira Maru. Like, Gul Dukat was already like such a despicable guy and hateable guy and like the perfect antagonist for that show. They did not need to add like, oh, by the way, Kira, go back in time and watch how I used to bang your mom.
Yeah. Awful. Awful. God, I actually like kind of forgot about that, like pushed it a little bit out of my mind until we were doing this slideshow. And I was like, oh man, there's so many romances I've like tried to suppress and like forget about. And that's one of them for sure. And
the other runner-up that I want to mention is Cisco and Mirror Jadzia Dax in the episode Through the Looking Glass. Because I think that's weird that he goes to the mirror universe and then has to pretend to be Mirror Cisco and actually has sex with the Mirror Jadzia.
Yeah.
That's just weird.
Yeah, that was very odd. Did not like that either.
Like, I get that he was undercover, but I wish that the writers hadn't put the character in that situation, you know?
Yeah,
Not
agree.
cool.
All right.
But if that is it for Deep Space Nine, we are going to move on to Star Trek Voyager. So let's reveal what we think are the best romances in Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, sorry. Well, spoilers, guys. Sorry.
That's okay. So our best romances. I am not shocked by this one at all.
Me either.
We both went with Tom and B'Elanna Torres.
Amazing.
And then with our runner-ups... Oh, interesting. You went with Neelix and Dexa from the episode Homestead, right? When he stays behind with the Talaxians.
Season 7.
And I went with another one episode romance, but Tuvok and the character Nos from the episode Gravity. But yeah, Tom and Balana. I went with this. This is a romance that I appreciate more now than I did as a kid watching it. Um, but I think as an adult, I really buy the I don't know, the believability of like these two people. Like they know each other for a couple years, and then it kind of takes a while for these feelings to show up, and then it kind of takes a while for them to admit them to themselves and then to each other. But then they end up being like a surprisingly good couple, I think,
Yeah.
and they're it's not the same level of opposites attract as say like Worf and Troy, but there's still like a little bit of that, and I just they complement each other in a little like good way, or some of like Tom's softness kind of balances out Balana, but
Yeah.
um, it's and her fieriness is kind of like good for him too. But I don't know what do you think? Why did you go with Tom and Balana?
I went with Tom and Balana because I think I relate the most to Balana and this relationship. I think I can be a very angry person sometimes. And like I loved having like
No,
all these
you're one of the sweetest people I've ever known. But
Well, sometimes I feel like Balana, and sometimes I feel like there's a little Klingon in me. Even though, as much as I want to be like Jadzia Dax, I feel like I'm more like Balana Torres.
you want us to be Jadzia and Worf,
I
but we're
do.
actually Tom and Balana.
Yeah, like I love that she has her cute little nerdy boyfriend, and like she gets to be this badass engineer, and like like you said, they balance each other so well, and I think they have a lot of like forgiveness and like love in their relationship too. Like when I mean forgiveness is there's a lot of like push and pull.
There's a lot of grace.
Yeah,
they
there's
give each other a lot of grace.
Exactly. And she's always encouraging him, like, go do your fun things, like go to the holodeck with your BFF Kim, like they're very supportive.
Yeah, go enjoy your hyperfixations.
Yeah, they're very
weirdo.
supportive of each other, and I love that. And like I think he knows that he's got a catch too. So I think there's a lot of like respect in this relationship.
Tom Paris as a character, he's kind of like Riker, and that like the older I get, the more I really appreciate this guy who like didn't really excite me that much when I was a kid watching Star Trek, but like I really love Tom Paris now, the older I get. And he also plays a big role in my honorable mention romance, Tuvok and Nos. So if people don't remember that episode, Tuvok, the Doctor, and Tom Paris are stranded on a planet with the woman played by Lori Petty. She's known for like Tank Girl, and she does the voice of Livewire and Superman, the animated series, and a ton of other things. But she gives a really great performance here, and she falls in love with Tuvok, and they don't know how long they're going to be stranded on this planet, and Tom is kind of like encouraging Tuvok to like consider like we might never get off this planet. This might be like a good relationship for you. We get like those flashbacks to young Tuvok and his romantic passions and having to go train with the Vulcan master, and I just love like the tragedy of that. It's so sad to me. And then at the end, it's such a beautiful moment when Tuvok has that mind meld with her to like explain to her, why like he can't be with her, but he also, through that he gets to experience like her, longing for wanting they just are able to like walk away from that understanding each other, and it's a really beautiful moment to me. And I totally buy Tim Russ and Lori Petty's performance in that episode and their chemistry.
Yeah, that was a very good episode. I agree with you. So for my honorable mention, I had Neelix and Dexa. I really loved this episode. As soon as there was a Talaxian colony in this episode, I was like, Neelix is staying. He's not going back, like, with them all the way.
It's pretty convenient. Right before the end of the show, they're like, oh, look, Neelix, here's a family for you.
But I've just felt like Neelix, like, has had such a hard time for 7 seasons to fit in and, like, I don't know, feel like at home and like comfortable. I don't know. There's always been something like kind of off. Like people are kind of mean to Neelix like often, and he's kind of awkward, But I loved like this like last minute. I thought it was. I mean, obviously it was like 2 episodes until the season finale, but last minute romance for him and like kind of drop him off here. But I don't know. I really loved like he has like been longing for a family and feeling like this I don't know, like wholeness. And I felt like this was offered with this kid and Dexa. So, I think she really needed like that support and some positivity, and he really just wanted some stability. And so I thought that this was a really great last minute ditch effort, basically, to get Neelix like into a family and in a partnership. So I really liked it. I thought it was very believable.
So we talked about the good romances in Voyager. Now let's talk about like the ones we don't like. The worst romances in Star Trek Voyager, according to us, are Neelix and Kes for Miss Taylor, and mine is Seven of Nine and Chakotay, which I'm kind of surprised you didn't go with as the worst. But let's talk about this one. Oh, our honorable mentions. I should mention you did put Chakotay in 7 for your honorable mention.
Yes.
And mine is Kes and Tom Paris. So we both have Kes and Chakotay on here.
Yeah.
But I'm going with Kes and Tom Paris specifically from the episode Before and After, where Kes is in that alternate future where her and Tom were married. And then she's like an old lady when they have a kid who is married to Harry Kim. And then like they have a kid. And it's weird.
Yeah.
Tell us about Neelix and Kes being the worst romance in Voyager, according to you.
Cool. So this was basically kidnapping, right? Like, he basically took her off world, and she was a kid. Like, what? Like,
She wanted to leave.
Old.
She wanted to leave the Ocampa
Yeah.
facility, but
She could have done that independently from a romantic interest, and not to be like, again, I think huge age gap, right? And like super felt like grooming, and there was a lot of like, especially season 1, like a lot of like self-confidence issues with Neelix, and like him taking it out on her when he's jealous, and there was just so much toxicity in this relationship. I was cringing often and really, really hated it.
yeah, and he's so jealous too.
Yeah,
he always is like when she like has like a conversation with Tom Paris, then Neelix like freaks out.
Yeah, I thought horrible and I liked Cass a lot, like assisting the doctor and stuff. Like she had great stuff independently, and he had great stuff independently, but together, not great. I know she wasn't a kid in her society, but it still felt. I thought it was just too.
But yeah,
much.
she's like never left her hometown before. She's like right out of high school, and then like here's like this guy who's like, oh, I'm this
kind of
interstellar
like,
merchant dude. Let me show you the world.
It was kind of like that trope, like in Hollywood, where it's like this like 18-year-old girl who wants to go to LA, and like she like has to go with this person that just so happens to be living there.
Yeah, this creep is like, get in my van, I'll take you.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just thought it was just kind of, it felt very forced to me and very toxic.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't a big fan of that.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that. With my choice of 7 of 9 and Chakotay, just like, is there anyone out there who likes that? I mean, because I said that, someone is going to be like, oh yeah, I love the two of them. I always shipped them. But yeah, I feel like there's already been so much said about this. But that felt so forced and such like a awkward thing to do to end the show with the two of them getting together. Thank goodness that modern Star Trek has retconned that apparently that relationship did not last very long. Because shortly after that, Chakotay is on the Protostar. Their breakup was either so bad that he's like, I'm going to the Delta Quadrant to get away from her, or he's like, I'm gonna go find me another Borg baddie. but the 7 of 9 thing didn't work out.
Yeah,
so I don't know which one it is, but it clearly did not last long.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, they're my honorable mention. Same reasons. I mean, it was gross. It was shocking when they did kiss in that episode. I was like, oh, man. Like, they're really just, like, trying to stick this to the wall. Like, they're throwing things at a wall and seeing what'll stick. And it was not good. That also felt like a last-ditch effort for a romance for 7. Because they've explored that for, like, 3 or 4 seasons at this point. And I felt like I felt like the writers were trying to wrap up everything, and like I think some things just don't have to be wrapped up, and I think that was what this kind of came out of, was poor writing.
Rachel is saying in the live audience, both 7 and Chakotay have better chemistry with Janeway.
Agreed.
And yeah, I would have bought that romance either of those more than the two of them together. In my runner-ups for honorable mention, I considered putting Seska and Chakotay, because of the whole like I used your DNA to make myself pregnant
Extremely bad.
stuff. Even though it turned out she actually had like the Kazon baby, but
Yeah.
but even that, it's like this woman like lying about who the baby daddy is, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
and I know like the actress was pregnant, so they were trying to work around that, but don't like that. But I kind of like the story of with Suska. I kind of like that. Oh, we had like the secret Cardassian all along, and so again, sometimes if I enjoy the story, I'm more forgiving. But in Discord, Vernon Smith said, or no, I actually think this was on Twitter, sorry, or Blue Sky maybe, somewhere. Vernon Smith said, Chakotay and Seven, he agrees with us, they were one of the worst. It just seemed weird. I actually kind of wanted to see her with either Harry or the Doctor, though I'm glad she eventually found Raffi. So,
Yeah.
a future show we're about to talk about. But Rachel also mentioned Tom and Balana. But she's also a fan of Riker and Troy and Bashir and Garrick. But I think we're done with Voyager. Let's get to Enterprise.
All right.
So our top romances in Star Trek Enterprise. Okay, so we actually went with the same, but in like reversed places. But I put for the best romance, I put Trip and T'Pol, and as my runner-up, Hoshi and Ravis from the episode 2 Days and 2 Nights on Ryza. But you went with Hoshi and Ravis as the best romance, and your honorable mention is Trip and T'Pol.
Yes. Can I speak first? I'm excited to talk about this one.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, Hoshi deserved better, and this was the best episode for her that we ever had, where she felt happy, and I was like, wow, she deserves so much. And I hate that they like abandoned her character so much throughout like their story writing. Her and Travis both
or the
like,
episodes they did give them were a bit bland.
Yeah, and I loved her connection with Ravis. He was, I don't know, they just blended so well, and I loved that they had similar interests and they were able to just have like a great weekend together. So very excited about that. Do you want to talk about Trip and T'Pol first?
Well, I always, bought into the Connor Trinneer and Jolene Blaylock's chemistry. I think like, the doctor prescribed us to give each other like sexy massages in season 3 is an incredibly forced way to kind of kickstart the intimacy. But the reason why I love this romance the most though is because of the writing they did in season 4 when Manny Koto took over the show. And I almost didn't put this on here because I'm so disappointed with how they resolved things. Like I almost thought maybe this should go in like the worst romances because I'm so disappointed in how it was ended. And with, Rick Berman and Brandon Braga deciding to kill Trip in the last episode for no reason, just because like they wanted to have like a big death in there.
Horrible.
Like the characters they created were so much better off when they handed them over to Manny Koto than when they were being written by Berman and Braga themselves. But yeah, there's not like a ton of romances to pick from in Enterprise, and especially not like a ton of good ones. So it's not like there's a lot of competition, but Connor and Jolene always sold it, and especially if you look at is it Demons or Terra Prime, but the two-parter, but whichever one is second. Like when they had like the baby that was created, they were like, but Elizabeth dies, and like how like Trip is like crying and talking to Paul about it, and just like you really like buy like that bond that they have. Mm-hmm. And then with my honorable mention being Hoshi and Ravis, I agree with you that it was like one of the best Hoshi moments in the show, in a show that didn't have many great Hoshi moments. Mm-hmm. But I also thought it was like a really cool positive depiction of like a casual encounter on vacation or something.
Yeah.
But it was for a show, and actually for an episode that has some very bad writing. Remember like Trip and Reed going clubbing in that episode, and like it's so like homophobic actually, and incredibly transphobic. But even like with that nasty stuff in there, the Hoshi B plot in that episode was actually handled very well, I think.
And I think was the best part of that episode. Also, I kind of love that everyone else in this episode kind of had a bad time, like a little bit, and then Hoshi's just like all happy and quiet in the shuttle pod back. Like, she's like, well, y'all, it sounds like y'all had a terrible time, but she's like really humble and like just keeps it to herself. Like she's very private about like the great time that she had. And I thought that was sweet.
Well, let's move on to the worst romances in
Ready?
Star Trek Enterprise.
I'm gonna get hanged for this.
Are you? Okay. We both went with the same one for worst romance, Archer and T'Pol. This is interesting. Your honorable mention is the same as your honorable mention for best romance, but you
It
went with
is.
Trip and T'Pol.
Yeah.
I went with Trip and the princess from Precious Cargo.
Oh, I almost picked that one too. It was horrible.
Yeah, just because like their attempt at doing this kind of like charming, wacky screwball comedy did not work.
Yeah.
I don't have a ton to say on that, but I'll go first with the Archer and T'Pol stuff. But
Sure.
yeah, that always felt incredibly forced, and it was awkward that like early on the show couldn't seem to make up its mind if it wanted to have like this chemistry between Archer and T'Pol or Trip and T'Pol. And a comment that we got in our subspace transmissions on Blue Sky, Lower Decker Astra says trying to force Archer and T'Pol was just dot 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 and then this emoji that doesn't look very happy. So they agree with me, but what about you? Why did you pick T'Pol and Archer?
Cool, yeah. I felt, again, very forced. There was, like, no chemistry between these actors. There's, like, so much in season 1 where they really are trying to force it, like jamming a square in a circle, and it is just awkward. And there's, like, a part where, like, she accidentally falls on Archer and her chest lands in his face, and it's just so...
Oh, yeah.
So cringy.
Yeah, the
Gross.
stupid slapstick comedy.
Oh, awful. And I chose my image from Twilight because I was really upset in this episode that she's become like his caretaker.
Right, that's the alternate future episode where he's like old and keeps losing his memory, and,
Right.
and she dedicates her life to taking care of him.
Yeah, and I wasn't a super fan of that. Like, it felt like if we're gonna like run this show this long, like would we put T'Pol and Archer together? And I was like, ew, like please do not, and I didn't love her like abandoning like her science passions and duties and her Vulcan like ness, I guess, like her culture or whatever, to come and like babysit Archer. Like surely Starfleet has someone that, or not Starfleet at the time, I'm sorry, but there's someone else that could be doing this. And I didn't love that they like forced her into this like nurturing role for him. Like it felt very like flat for me. Like, oh, a woman is a caretaker. And I didn't like that for her.
I want to ask you about Trip and T'Pol as your honorable mention on both of these categories. But before I do, I just want to comment that in the live audience, Jill mentioned Archer and Shran. I never read that as a romance, but I kind of like that. And then also DT is mentioning Can't Forget Porthos and that Spy's dog.
Yeah.
That was also in 2 Days and 2 Nights.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that moment. But of the two dogs meeting each other and growling on the balcony. So we should have known she was up to no good as soon as Porthos growled at her dog, or whatever that creature was. But tell us, why did you put Trip and T'Pol as your honorable mention for both best romance and worst romance in Star Trek Enterprise?
Amazing. Because I hated it and I loved it. And there's like I think the reason I put it for both is the writing was so back and forth on these characters. There are some episodes I really bought their romance and was like, wow, I could root for them. And then there were some where I was like, this is terrible and I don't want to see this anymore. Like, please stop trying, and like the neuropressure stuff, the massage stuff was super terrible. I hated that so much. And then, I don't know, like it again felt very forced to me, especially in the beginning. And even like scenes where I would turn to you and be like, these actors look uncomfortable. And like they weren't acting anymore. Like it looked gross and cringy to me. But then in like season 4, we had some really good moments with Trip and T'Pol, which is why I put them in best, because I basically hated every romance in Enterprise.
There's a lot to praise and a lot to complain about in the Trip and T'Pol relationship, both ways. So,
and again, if we want to talk about age gaps, like Vulcans are much older than humans, and she's like 66, I think, and like Trip is not. I don't think that bothers me as much for some reason with the Vulcans compared to the Ocampans, and I think it's just because of longevity. But that does mean like Trip is older, like I feel like, I don't know, it's really difficult to like to talk about age gaps when these species all have different lifespans. But I don't know. Some of them make more sense to me and some of them make less sense to me. And I think it comes down to maturity for both of the characters involved. And in this case, yeah, I think that, in the later seasons, Trip and T'Pol have better chemistry. And I loved their last episode where they, like, awkwardly, someone makes a child for them. um, and that is very emotional. Like, whenever they lose their baby, and even though it wasn't like their baby, it was still theirs genetically.
Connor Trenier talks about a lot that he was so emotional in that scene because he had just realized at the time that him and his wife were pregnant.
Right. So I don't know. There's just so many gems and so many bad moments for both these characters. So long story. That's why they're my honorable mention for both.
Okay. Well, let's move on to the Kelvin timeline. So we're going to bounce out of the Prime timeline for a moment. We'll come back, but here we go. Kelvin timeline. This blows my mind, but we did the same thing again, except in reverse. But for the best romance, Miss Taylor went with George and Winona Kirk. I went with Sulu and Ben, his husband, in Star Trek Beyond. But your honorable mention is Ben and Hikaru Sulu, and my honorable mention is George and Winona Kirk.
What's up?
So we're thinking. To be fair, Kelvin timeline, not a ton of romances to choose from, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same two on the next slide as well for the worst romances.
I think they'll be swapped again, but yeah,
perhaps. But yeah, let's talk about this. I went with Sulu and his husband Ben, because that was like, again, I think it took Star Trek too long to get here. Honestly, like Star Trek Enterprise, we should have had more queer representation in that show. I noticed it at the time on UPN, the same network, in the TV show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They were doing queer relationships. And yet on Star Trek Enterprise, nothing. It was like everything was hyper hetero. That's how Rick Berman wanted it to be. But we finally get to see these two men married with a family in Star Trek Beyond with Sulu and Ben. Ben played by Doug Jung, who co-wrote the movie with Simon Pegg. So that's cool that like the writers of the movie actually get to play characters in the movie. They get to be Scotty and Sulu's husband, so that's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. But you went with George and Winona, so you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I just felt I put them as my best romance for Kelvin timeline because they have more interaction and there's dialogue between them, so we get some more understanding of their relationship. And I felt like George was very good at like comforting and showing his love and support for his wife during this tragedy like that we open up with, and it makes me cry every time. Like, this was actually
such a strong scene.
So good. So this movie, the Star Trek 09, was the first ever Star Trek I ever saw.
Right. You had seen the Kelvin movies before we met. Right. That was your only Star Trek.
That was my only Star Trek. And
until last year.
This was really touching for me. I remember crying in the theater to the opening of this. It was very, very strong. And it was very believable. Yeah,
the movie like gets its hooks into your heart right off the bat. It is one of the most emotionally charged scenes, not just in that trilogy, but out of all Star Trek, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, there's a couple of comments I'm not sure if you want to read. But yeah, Jennifer Morrison and Chris Hemsworth both got really large after this. I actually knew Jennifer from Once Upon a Time, so that was cool to see her in there.
Crazy Joe's Concession says, I hate Sulu and Ben because George Takei was not on board. If you're going to borrow an aspect from the actor's actual life, you need to be sure they approve. I can understand that. I don't know if I fully agree. I think that at some point George Takei has to accept that he's just a guy who plays Sulu sometimes and the character belongs to this larger franchise. But yeah, I think it was like kind of awkward how George Takei said, I never played Sulu as a gay guy. I always played him as a guy who's like attracted to women. But it's actually the Women at Warp podcast, one of the best Star Trek podcasts ever. they came up with the what should have been like an obvious suggestion was like, let's just assume Sulu is bi in every
Yeah.
universe, and it all makes sense. And I like that. That's how I read it. But I can understand. I can understand not approving if Takei doesn't approve. I disagree with that, but I get it. Um,
All right.
but yeah, I think that's everything I got to say on the good. So okay, these got to be the same too. Let's
I
see
think
if they're in the
so.
same
Here
place.
we go. Worst romance.
Worst romances of the Kelvin timeline. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
they
knew
are
they were gonna be
swapped.
swapped.
You want to say what they are?
Sure. So my worst romance is Kirk and Carol Marcus. Fatheree's worst is Spock and Uhura. And then they're swapped for honorable mention. So mine is Spock and Uhura, and Fatheree's honorable mention is Kirk and Carol Marcus.
Yeah. So why did Kirk and Carol not work for you?
Okay, I'm gonna tell you just from one scene alone where she tells him not to look and he turns around anyway. Absolutely hate that. Like, horrible
Yeah.
character. Like, that's gross. So I did not like that. Obviously, like, now that I've seen the original series movies, like, I understand the Carol thing more now, which I think is really cool. But I remember really hating this in Into Darkness when I saw it for the first time. Didn't believe it. There's not a lot of chemistry, not a lot of interaction, and I just really hated that scene. I felt like that was a poor character choice for Kirk.
Yeah, no, it seems like she's just there to like be cute, and they have her in her underwear for one scene, so it's like, oh look, we can show off our sexy supermodel actress. Yeah, that was all incredibly forced. It kind of makes me respect the Kirk and Carol Marcus of the Prime timeline even. Although, like, I gotta be fair with the original series, animated series, first 6 movies category, I almost went with Kirk and Carol Marcus there.
Yeah.
But I was going with it here. So, but I chose Spock and Uhura as the worst romance because I know a lot of people like really bought into Zoe Saldana and Zach Quinto, and you know that was like a lot of people, that was like the big appeal of the Kelvin timelines to them. But I'm just the old fuddy-duddy who's like, I don't see Spock and Uhura being romantic together. Just like, and we're talking about like what the actors approve of and don't approve of. Nichelle Nichols said that this didn't make sense to her. She thought this was silly.
Yeah.
She didn't approve of this romance. But I loved in Star Trek Beyond when like the movie opens with them breaking up. I'm like, oh, I kind of I like this Kelvin timeline a lot more now. So
Yeah.
Beyond got off on a good foot for me, and it is. I think Star Trek '09 is like the best movie, but I think Star Trek Beyond is the best Star Trek of all those movies.
Yeah,
it's the
I
most,
would agree.
It's the most Star Trekian story of all of them. But
Yeah, I actually didn't have as strong as an opinion of disliking Spock and Uhura in this, but to be fair, I had watched Into Darkness and '09, you know, with them being a couple before I saw anything from the original series. So this was like the first relationship of Spock that I had seen and the first of Uhura's that I had seen, and I just believed it because like that's what they're presenting, you know, so I didn't have like that bias of neither of them being together before or anything. And I didn't hate it. Like, I didn't think it was like the best relationship ever or whatever, but after watching the original series, I definitely thought it was more awkward, like on the watch that we just did.
And some people try to say that there's like a little flirtiness between Uhura and Spock in the original series, in like in Charlie X when they're having like their jam session in the mess hall, or when Uhura is talking about oh, you know, tell me I'm beautiful and stuff, and Vulcan has no moon in the Man Trap. But I never particularly read that as flirty or romantic. I just read that as like, oh, they're co-workers. They live together, they work together. And I'm glad that Strange New Worlds has avoided the Spock and Uhura stuff.
Same.
So, very cool. Not a ton of romance to pick from in the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah, it was limited.
Not a shocker we went with the same 4 things, but...
Ready? What's next?
Discovery. So let's find out. Oh, wait, I do want to point out in the live audience, Rachel said Alice Eve is such a talented actress, and Into Darkness does not use her well. And like, yeah, I thought like, can this person act? But like, I've been told like she's great in other movies and stuff. And I was like, can she not do an American accent? Why doesn't she do an American accent? And I've been told like, oh, she does like a perfect American accent, and like a ton of other things. So yeah, like, J.J. Abrams, I'm not like a full-on Abrams hater, but he definitely did not do well with that character or that actor in that movie. But yeah, let's move on to Star Trek Discovery. What are the top romances according to us?
Of
Okay,
course.
so we both went with the same choice for our best romance in the show. We both went with Michael Burnham and Book. However, our honorable mentions are different. You have Saru and Tarina, and I went with Stamets and Kolber. I'm glad about this because I really wanted to put Saru and Tarina. But I wanted Stamets and Kolber a little bit more. But
yeah, I like Stamets and Kolber as well. Yeah, so I'm Michael and Book were just absolutely one of it's just heart like shattering, heart mending. Like their relationship is so good. Like season 3, right? Or 4, where they introduced Book. Which,
3.
Is it 3? I immediately just super believed his character, and like the chemistry between them was amazing.
Incredible chemistry. I was shocked when I learned that David Ajala didn't do a chemistry test with Sonequa Martin Green. They never met until after he was hired. And it's like, man, like they really found the perfect guy to be her love interest.
Yeah, I love their energy. They both have such like this lightness and like adventure and spontaneity. Like they just have this great bond, and like I love to see them working together so much, like especially in season 3 and 4. And it's just wonderful. And I love that they have a kid, Kat, Grudge, and then of course they get married and have kid later. So
we get to see their happily ever after.
It's so
though.
nice to see that and have the flash forward. I love that. And
one way I've described them on the show before is like they are like very different people, and they both have like these super large personalities, and like this mavericky Starfleet captain from the past, and like this roguish courier from this destroyed world, and he becomes like a refugee and stuff. But they have like these big personalities, but they give each other space to be big. And then like we actually see them go through some like legitimate conflict in season 4, but like they still come out through that. And so I love seeing their relationship tested and survive.
Yeah, and it's tested for long periods. Like they go like almost a year at some point, where Book is like doing community service or whatever, and like they have to rekindle that relationship, and so they fall in love again. And I think that is a beautiful love story, and there's so much forgiveness again and grace in those. So love Michael and Book. I could talk about them for hours, so we should not.
A lot of people in the live audience love them. I see Commodore Trev say Michael and Book should win for best Trek romance. Lieutenant DT says Michael and Book. Joanne says Michael and Book are hands down the best. So not much controversy here on Discovery, it seems.
So good.
In the Discord, MZ Rad says Burnham and Book are a great couple, in my honest opinion. And on Twitter, our friend Captain Pikachu said definitely Michael and Book, but she also agrees with me on Stamets and Kolber. She goes on to say, there were such complexity and love in those relationships, going through the ups and downs, but always showing respect and understanding and compassion. And yeah, we see Stamets and Kolber's relationship tested also in season 2. I didn't think that was handled quite as well as Michael and Book, but kind of a fault of the writing. But the acting, I've always bought Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp like on screen together.
Yeah.
And it's more of that representation that I think Star Trek was, behind the curve on. Another thing I consider as a runner-up, also because of representation, but Adira and Gray with the trans and non-binary characters having a romance together. I think the writing didn't explore much of that relationship, and it was kind of treated as like this innocent teenage relationship, and I can see them being like a little reserved, depicting that on screen. But like Discovery, like Deep Space Nine, has a lot of romances though. If you sit and think about it, you can think up several. So it's kind of I would say it would have been kind of hard whittling it down, but I think everyone's going to agree like the top 3 are Michael and Book, Saru and Tarina, and Stamets and Kolber. But tell us about Saru and Tarina.
Yeah, I really was looking forward to this. I think one of the very first interactions with Tarina, I was thinking that Saru and her kind of had that little spark. And I was very excited that they decided to explore that relationship because Saru has kind of felt like a loner to me, like in the first couple seasons.
He's like the only Kelpian.
Yeah, and I don't know, he just is one of my favorite characters, and I was hoping that, something really cool would happen for his character, and I didn't think it would be a romance, honestly. Like, I thought it was gonna lean into the fathering of like Sakul or Sukal. I thought they were gonna lean heavier into him being more like a father figure, and so I was surprised that they kind of like gave this romance and leaned into it. But I loved it. Like, I loved, again, like this respect of you have your thing, I have my thing, and we're going to do the best we can all the time and support each other. And I just felt very mature and sweet, and I loved to see it. Like, I had no complaints about this.
Rachel in the live audience was commenting that it's nice to see Doug Jones getting to do romantic scenes. And he's normally just like scary monster guy, so that was cool. And I just want to mention as a runner-up, I did consider Maul and Locke. Because I like the Bonnie and Clyde in space. Yeah. I thought that was a fun couple to see, but...
I really thought that was going to be your most best romance over Michael and Book. Because you talked about them a lot.
Yeah. No, I really dug them. More than most people, it seems. But enough about the best romances.
I'm so scared for this next slide. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah. Who do we think are the worst romances? So we went with the same one again. We both say Michael and Ash Tyler as the worst romance. Our honorable mentions are different here. You want to read those?
So my honorable mention is Adira and Gray. And then Fatheree's honorable mention is Giorgio and Linus.
Yeah, which I saw Cake is Eternal and the live audience shout out Linus and Giorgio, but the reason why I put that as my honorable mention for worst romance is because I hate that they just like tease it in one episode and that never goes anywhere. It's just like Giorgio like saying like, oh, you have such big eyes. And then he's like, here on movie night, here, I got you some popcorn. And then like, then they just drop it. So I hate that being teased and then like nothing happens. So that's why Cake is Eternal. I was having a hard time finding like romances and Discovery. I didn't like, but
same.
I kind of considered Adira and Gray on both sides as either like honorable mention for best or worst. So it's interesting. But before we talk about that, let's talk about like Burnham and Tyler. Just like this, I don't have a ton to say, but like this relationship, it never bothered me.
No.
Until I saw like Burnham and Book, and then I'm like, oh, she really did not have anywhere near this level of chemistry with Tyler. It's like going back and watching that, it just kind of feels wrong when you see them together. But
watching this for the first time, do you remember when I was like, no, no, no,
yeah,
no?
You hated
I
it.
was like, please.
You hated it.
Please do not put them together. And they did. I was angry every single time. I was like, get this man off my screen. I hate this couple. I don't like him. It was like one of my least favorite characters ever. And it just again felt like pushing like the square into the circle thing. Like where it's like forcing it. And it just felt awkward and cringy. And like Ash Tyler was just kind of an asshole, like narcissistic.
You really did not like his character.
I hated his character. And I really just wanted Michael to like have something nice for once, and it just happens to be like there was too many issues with this guy. Like there's all these red flags and she's still going to this guy, and I'm just like, man, you could do so much better. And like I first watch through hated him so much, and when we got Book, I was like relieved, in comparison to this. I was like, this is exactly what I wanted, and Ash was the exact opposite of everything I wanted for her. And so I'm gonna jump into the honorable mention here. So I put Adira and Gray, and I was on the fence about this. Like, I don't actually hate this romance, but I thought it was a little awkward. And I think it really is just because it's like a teenage romance, and I had a hard time obviously relating to it. Because it just felt kind of like there's like times where like Gray disappears, and then like there's like this communication issues and stuff, and like I don't know, Gray goes back to Trill and they're long distance, and like it was just kind of, it felt a little clunky. And so I don't think I didn't hate them together. I felt like the romance wasn't like explored in the best way. And I think that's the only thing I really had against this relationship.
Yeah, and I think like the writing wasn't particularly interesting, and the uh, the performances I think in that first episode when we see like Gray die, and but other than that and like that flashback scene, I never really bought into the emotion between the two of them.
Yeah, I honestly, really quick, I just want to say, like, I think they should have left Gray dead and, like, explored that more. But bringing them back to life, I didn't like that. Like, I had a harder time with it being like, oh, now it's a substantial thing, instead of leaving that behind. I think there was a better lesson for Adira to learn by letting go of Gray than there was to bring them back.
Although eventually they do let go of each other when
I know.
when they break up.
But I just think it was kind of I don't know, just odd writing.
Yeah,
for me.
I do like that it's kind of like a healthy breakup, like at the end.
Oh, agree.
Between like two young people.
Totally. I thought that was handled really well.
But I think that's all we have to say on Discovery. So the next show we're talking about is Star Trek Picard, the best romance as well as the honorable mention. So we got the exact same on this.
All right.
But we both went with Riker and Troy as the best romance in Star Trek Picard, and we both went with Seven and Raffi as the honorable mention.
Yep.
Why did you put Riker and Troy as the best romance?
Okay. Because I didn't love them in The Next Generation. I did not love this romance. I hated the push and pull of it.
You didn't like Riker.
I hate Riker in TNG strongly. And as an old man, I like Riker.
You like him as the family man.
Yes, I love Riker the family man, and Riker, Captain Riker, Admiral Riker, those things, like when they get explored further. And I love this like home life that they've created. I love this like settled down vibe that they had. Like, I don't know why, it just works so much better for me, for them. And I loved like their support for their friends, their support for their families. They've gone through the loss of a child, and I feel like their relationship is just so much stronger, and like they're so sweet on each other, and they're caring, and I love how much that Riker is enamored with Troy.
And you see them have their relationship tested also, because then like in season 3 of Picard, when we learned that Troy had kind of betrayed Riker's trust and was using her Betazoid abilities to suppress his guilt. But you can also understand like why like a loving wife would want to do that to, you know, comfort her grieving husband. And but I mean, like, I disagree with her, but I can understand it. And then like but seeing them like come out on the other side of that, I like that they were able to, you know, we never really saw them happy together except for like a little bit in Star Trek Insurrection and Nemesis, I guess, when they get married. Mm-hmm. But I don't think those stories are particularly great.
Agree.
So I liked in Picard when they were able to like slow down. You know, we spent like a lot of time with them that episode in Nepenthe, and again just like knowing couples that have like lost a kid like that like you know, Thad Riker's bedroom and how like it devastates Troy to even like go in there and just like oh man, this family felt so real. It felt like there had been like the years of this Riker Troy family that I hadn't seen, and then like it drops me into the middle of it decades later, and I totally bought what they were showing me. Our honorable mentions, Seven and Raffi. This was one that I almost put as like a worst romance, because I really don't like the way that they.
Whoa.
Well, I don't like the way that like they were broken up there at the end.
Oh yeah, agree.
And but I mean, that's why like I couldn't put it as like the best. I love their chemistry though. I'm so glad that they explored that. I just wish that it resolved with them getting staying together. Yeah.
Agree. Yeah, I loved a lot of their scenes together. I particularly loved the image I had picked was when they were like playing girlfriends at the museum or wherever, and they were talking to the security guard, and they just like are so natural at it, and I loved it. I just thought it was so cute.
Oh yeah, when they're back in time in modern day Los Angeles, and Seven is like, oh, we want to like capture an image, and Raffi says she means take a picture.
Yeah, I thought that was sweet. All right. Ready for the worst?
Our worst romances in Star Trek Picard are Miss Taylor went with Picard and Crusher as the worst romance. I went with Soji and the Romulan Narek.
Okay, valid.
From season 1. But our honorable mentions are the same. We both went with Picard and Laris. I want to say, like, I'm not a Laris hater. I would have been fine if, like, the show ended with Picard and Laris together. I just don't really like the way that they handled the story as far as, like, let's just kill off her husband off screen, and
Yeah.
then let's have, like, Laris ride off into the sunset waiting for her boyfriend to show up, and he never does, and
Yeah.
the show just forgets about her.
Agree. That is exactly why it is in my worst. And I will say, I don't like almost any relationship Picard has had. So I feel like almost it was really hard not to put him in like the TNG worst ones as well.
Before you
But-
continue, I just want to say that's similar to some subspace transmission we received on Twitter. The catabasis of Optimus Prime on Twitter said, "Almost all Picard ships are bad. It's true, and I'm sorry, but if I was pulling for him, but I'm sorry. They say, I'm sorry, but I was pulling for him to move on with his life. He has Laris as an option now. Instead, we had season 3 coward non-committal. I'm sorry, I never found him and Crusher to be an interesting sexual dynamic. I didn't find them to be. I think I found them to be like an interesting romantic dynamic at some point. But
yeah.
tell us, like, that's your worst your worst romance in Star Trek Picard. Why is it Picard and Crusher?
Okay, it's because it's my least favorite trope. I hate the trope when the woman or the female, whatever, has a child unbeknownst to the man and runs off with the kid, doesn't tell the man or whatever, the father of the child, at all. That is like one of my least favorite tropes. I hate it so much. And I know that they explain it away that, you know, Crusher didn't want her kid to be like in this like hellish, horrible, tragedy-ridden life because Picard is dangerous or whatever. But like, dude, he's like 100 years old in Picard. Like, how does he not know his kid yet? Like, that's insane to me, and I hate that they made her do that in her character. I think that's a terrible, terrible way to write a female character, and I think it's horrible to make her a single mother, and I don't know, I hated all of that, and especially with how much that they teased Picard and Crusher in TNG and never put them together. They never committed to that. Even in the flash forward sequence, they were divorced and didn't have a kid.
Like season 1 and season 2 at TNG, you would be like, oh, they're so cute together.
Yeah. And by the end, I was like, just stop trying to make this work. Like, I don't believe it anymore because you keep teasing it and I hate it. So yeah, so that's why I put Picard and Crusher. I love them both individually. Actually, that might not be true. I don't know if I love Picard, but I love Bev. I think she's cool as hell.
There were times when you liked Picard a lot.
Whenever he was like getting yelled at by the Admiral lady in Picard, that was my favorite Picard moment. He deserved that. But yeah, and I guess that leads me into Picard and Laris because like in the end of season 2, he's like, oh, Laris does make sense for me. Like, okay, let's commit to that. And, you know, full send Laris. And then we open season 3, episode 1. Oh, we're in love with Laris. Oh, I got a text from, like, this emergency from Bev. And then we never, ever see Laris again in Picard season 3. Like, he just abandons her flat. And I hate everything about all of that.
I did see in the live audience, Aaron mentioned the best romance of Picard was Laris and Zhaban.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's definitely one that I was thinking of. Jill really agrees with you that that is a bad trope, the secret pregnancy.
Yep.
But she also loved Laris and Zhaban as a couple.
Awesome.
So, Lieutenant DT is suggesting Jack and Sydney for worst. I don't know, that one didn't get very far, but I thought that was kind of cute to have like Picard's kid and Geordi's kid flirting with each other, but we never really see where that went. Maybe if they make that legacy show at some point, but I don't know how likely that is. But Commodore Trev says Picard just needed to settle down with the dog and move on.
I agree.
So, no one seems to like Picard's relationships, actually.
Yep.
But we can move on to the next show. So some animated Star Trek coming your way. We're gonna do Star Trek Lower Decks, followed by Prodigy, and then end on Strange New Worlds.
You ready?
Let's go on to Lower Decks. What are the best romances in Star Trek Lower Decks? So So this is a fun one. You went with Carol and Alonzo Freeman,
Love them.
and they're actually my honorable mentions, but I put as my top romance Tendy and Rutherford.
Okay.
Your honorable mention Shax and Tiana.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but the Tendy and Rutherford relationship for me, I was for years I was a big hashtag Tinderford shipper. I thought that it was obvious the two of them had strong chemistry. I mean, there's a lot of episodes where they pretty much flat out say that they have romantic feelings for each other. And it was something like I was always hoping for the show to like actually show them in a relationship. We never got that, but I always enjoyed the chemistry. But yeah, like my honorable mention is Captain and Admiral Freeman, because I thought that was a cool, healthy, older relationship, and they're both these Starfleet professionals, but they make it work long distance and co-parenting a Starfleet kid, and we see them deal with a lot of difficulties too. When Carol is wrongfully accused and put on trial and stuff, and so they always like come back and survive all of their trials. But what do you? They're your top picks. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I really loved like Lower Decks. Like in general, has like a sassiness in it, and I loved like Carol and Alonzo kind of have that. There's like this kind of like fun banter that they sometimes have when they're on like Zoom calls together. And I think it's really fun. Like they love each other, but they're also really good at poking fun at each other and being like direct and stuff, and like hassling like their kid, like their young adult daughter who's like kind of a pain in both their necks sometimes. I think it's really cool to see them like navigate parenthood with an adult child.
They feel
cool.
like if you have like that friend who they have like the older parents, but they're still like super in love with each other, and like even if you don't see that all the time, you just like occasionally peek in on like the two of them interacting or something, like you can just see like this undeniable love that they have. It felt real in that way. Like I know old married I don't even want to say old because they're not like super old, but the older married couples like that in real life, and it felt like that. But your honorable mention, Shax and Tiana. I think that's a fun one.
Yeah, I loved all their interactions. They were so wild. Like, I think that was what I loved most. Like, Tiana's just, like, kind of has, like, really fun dialogue. Like, is always cracking jokes and, like, making all this insane, like, commentary and stuff. She's always cussing a storm. And I love, like, Shax being, like, this big, like, bodybuilder man, and they're just like, I don't know, like the chemistry is hilarious in a great way. Like
it all develops like off screen, because in like season 1 Tiana is like, hey, do you think your mom would mind if me and that Bajoran beefsteak made a love connection or something? And it's like, so it's like in season 1 they were just starting to get the hots for each other, and then they apparently have like a lot of interesting holodeck kinky adventures together. But then there's also we see like these moments of like genuine like romance and affection between the two of them.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was really fun. Also, she opens up to him a lot too. Like I think he's the only person that knows how she lost her tail or something like that.
Yeah.
Like she's been vulnerable with him and too. So there's like both sides to that relationship that we don't get to see, but I think it's cool.
Right. But it's part of like the premise of the show is that like we focus on the lower deckers. So like these, what should be the main characters of the ship, they're the ones having they're like the Tom and B'Elanna of the show,
right.
But we're focusing on the little people instead of the bridge officers. So let's go to the worst romances.
Here we go.
All right. What do we got? So, okay, I can see that being a popular choice, but Miss Taylor went with Peanut Hamper and Rhoda for the worst romance in Lower Decks, and mine is the same as my best romance. I also went with Tindy and Rutherford.
Okay.
But I'll explain why in a moment. I see they're your honorable mention.
Yeah, Tindy and Rutherford for my honorable mention.
And my honorable mention is Boimler and Barb in the season 1 episode Cupid's Errand Arrow. Mainly because like I didn't like how like annoyingly jealous they make Boimler for comedic effect in that episode.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Peanut Hamper and Rhoda.
Okay, so I put this as worst, but I enjoyed it thoroughly. I hated it so much, but I loved it so much. I thought this episode was hilarious. This is the episode. Let me look at my notes here. A mathematically perfect redemption, where Peanut Hamper is like faking their way for redemption. And I kind of bought this romance when I watched it.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I believe it. Like Peanut Hamper's in love with Rauda, and like they're
This
getting
little
along.
exo-comp and this Birdman.
Yeah, but there were some TMI shots that I didn't need to see, and then the betrayal at the end really caught me off guard. But also, like, I hated how much that affected Rauda, right, and like the whole colony. So. Overall, I picked it as a worst romance because it was a little bit wild, and I thought, but I enjoyed it still. Like I enjoyed watching it, but it was kind of crazy for me.
Yeah. I like that story though. I love the like I buy into it. I believe it. I'm like, oh, Peanut Hamper has changed, and then when the rug is pulled out from under me, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh no, I fell for it.
Same.
She eventually is redeemed, later,
Yeah.
but yeah, like the Tindy and Rutherford thing, I go back and forth on it because I really wanted them to become a relationship by the end of the show, and it's funny when we interviewed Mike McMahon a few weeks ago. One of the things that he mentioned is that like they recorded some endings in that final episode where the characters did get together, but he said like it just never sounded right and the actors didn't like it. So I don't know. Like I wish that the show could figure out a way to make that work. I'm ultimately like disappointed that we didn't get that. But I kind of hearing Mike McMahon explain it, I kind of understand. But he has consistently made it sound like that at some point he's going to try really hard to get us more Tindy and Rutherford, and I think it'll happen someday. We're going to have more Lower Decks at some point in the future.
I'm about it.
So I'm hoping that, I want to see it doesn't necessarily have to be like, the book and Burnham, like, oh, they're happily ever after. They get to like grow old together and have a family and like we see like their kids be successful. I don't necessarily need that, but yeah, I want them to be boyfriend and girlfriend. Or just like at least like kiss, damn it. Like give me something.
Okay, so I put them as my worst honorable mention because I don't like it romantically.
Okay.
I actually like them more as friends. So
You're not alone. We have several people in the live audience that are saying the same thing.
In my experience, there's some people that come into your life that should remain friends. And then if you explore deeper, you lose that friendship. And it's like, oh, maybe I should have just remained friends. And then I could have had this really cool person in my life, whatever. And I think if they push it, I don't think it will work. I think it will break what they have, like this really fun, energetic friendship. And I don't want it to break. Like, I think I would like to see it just stay platonic and like super supportive and maybe even like a step into like siblinghood, maybe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just think like all the moments of like Rutherford being like, oh, I got to make this hologram right to impress this girl because she's so cute. Like he says that in the first Badgie episode, or like when we see when they're on on Ferenginar and how like they both seem to have like such strong romantic feelings, like they're scared to accept. But I can definitely understand people who enjoy the friendship so much they just want it to stay like that.
Yeah.
But let's move on to Star Trek Prodigy. We're going to do Prodigy and Lower Decks, and then we're done. But what are the...
Prodigy and Strange New Worlds.
I'm sorry, Prodigy and Strange New Worlds, and then we're done. But yeah, what are our top relationships for Prodigy?
Okay.
We both went with the same for the best romance. You have an interesting honorable mention here. But to be fair, there's not a ton of romance in Prodigy.
Which is fair, because it's a kid's...
Right.
They're all
Yeah,
kids.
it was the Nickelodeon Star Trek. But we both picked Zero and Majel for the best romance in the show. Your honorable mention is Chakotay and Adrik, his first officer on the Protostar. Aurelian Birdman.
Yeah.
You have multiple Birdman picks. My honorable mention is Mirror Janeway and Mirror Chakotay.
Interesting.
Because those two are for sure hanging and banging. Like the show kind of like tiptoed around with Janeway and Chakotay. Like, oh, we don't want to piss off the Janeway Chakotay shippers, but we don't want to actually make that canon, so it kind of had to tiptoe around it. But like with the mirror universe and correct mirror, like there's no way that like that Janeway and that Chakotay aren't getting it on.
Yeah.
I thought that was fun to see. But yeah, Zero and Majel, why'd you pick them as your top romance?
Oh, I thought it was just a very sweet, I don't know, romance, and I thought it kind of snuck in there really well. Like it didn't feel super forced. It felt super sweet, and like that was all it really needed to be.
And you wouldn't expect it from the Medusan, from the non-corporeal character.
Right.
But I also thought they did some really cool, Vulcan stuff. Like them having the psychic connection.
Yeah.
Kind of like T'Pol and Trip. But I think that adding her as a character to the group added to the show a lot.
Yeah, it matured the show a lot, I think. Like Zero and Majel were both like some of the more mature characters in that show.
Yeah, especially like when Gwen is gone.
Yeah.
So
So my honorable mention, I kind of like slapstick this together a little bit, but
yeah, this is very headcanon-y.
It's very headcanon, and it is solely because whenever they're on the protostar and that on where Adric had died or whatever, like to retrieve the crystal part, whatever, for the ship. Sorry guys, I don't remember all the details. But
when he was trying to gather the antimatter they needed for the warp core.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's like a scene where Chakotay is carving Adric, and like I don't know. It's definitely could totally be platonic, and I just really don't like Chakotay with most of the characters. And I thought that like the episodes where they're like working together to like get off of the bad planet in season 1, and they explore that even to season 2, but they're like, I'm struggling right now to catch up, but like when Dahl and them like mess up that timeline and like he's supposed to die there, and I don't know, there's just a lot of like, I think there's context, and I don't think there's a lot of
I'd rather see Chakotay and Adric than Chakotay and Seven.
Yeah, I agree with Jill that it could be brotherly love too, but I would headcanon this. And yeah.
They did spend a lot of time imprisoned together and stranded together. But
all right, ready for the worst?
Yeah, who are the worst romances
in
in Star Trek Prodigy? So you went with Dal and Gwen. They're actually my honorable mention. Who did I go with?
So your worst romance for Prodigy is Chakotay and Hologram Janeway. And my honorable mention is Mirror Janeway and Chakotay. So all around hate for this, I guess.
But okay, Chakotay and Hologram Janeway, I don't actually think there was a relationship there. But yeah, after Chakotay loses Adric, he just has like Hologram Janeway. And I know like a lot of people who ship them are like, oh, maybe this Janeway, this Hologram Janeway had a relationship with Chakotay. But I don't even, it's actually Aaron who's here in the live audience, so he can vouch for this, but he summed it up really best one time when he told me, like, oh yeah, they actually should say in a line of dialogue, oh, we're like brother and sister. I know no show would ever do that because they don't want to piss off the Chakotay and Janeway shippers. Yeah. But that's kind of how I read Chakotay and Janeway as brother and sister, but I agree. I was just desperate to come up with something for Prodigy.
Yeah.
And so my honorable mention being Dal and Gwen, I actually like that young, innocent romance between the two of them. But I just put that on here because, I like all the other romances more.
Yeah,
so.
There's not a lot to pick from Prodigy.
But why'd you pick them as your worst?
Okay, I actually don't like them together. Mostly because I don't like Dal.
Yeah, his immaturity bothers you.
He gets on my nerves so much, and like he does have some character development. I think if the show went further, obviously I would like him more.
We need a season 3 Netflix.
Yeah, I love Gwen though. Like I think she's super cool. Like she's got some cool powers. Like she has a really great storyline, and I really dig her character. And it felt very much like, oh, we'll just slap these two people together because they're the big 2 stars of the show. Like, I didn't really feel like there was a lot of, like, romantic opportunity there. It felt...
I don't know. I called it in the first episode. I was like, oh, these two are gonna be an item.
But to me, it felt like, oh, that's just gonna be how it is because that's what's supposed to happen.
Kind of like
and not
paint by numbers.
That's like what you expect, but it's not like... I don't know. I just don't think that Dal, like, was on the same level as Gwen. I think, like, he was, like... I don't know. Like Gwen is
She didn't have
very
many
smart,
options.
and yeah, no,
There was
she
like
did not.
Murph, Jenkum Pog, or Dal.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Gwen was an outstanding character, and I liked Dal like a little, but not at the level of being like a romantic person or a romantic interest for Gwen. Like I think she deserved better, basically. And I don't think that Dal like. I don't know. I also think it's just weird to like force a romance.
Rachel says something interesting in the live audience. She says, I get Dal having a crush on Gwen, but I don't see them having chemistry right now.
I agree with
I can see
that. Yeah, I definitely understand Dal having a crush on Gwen. I don't understand Gwen reciprocating. That's what I get. That's what I don't get.
And your Mirror, Janeway, and Chakotay being your honorable mention?
Mainly just because I hate them.
Just because of the ick of it?
Yeah.
But see, I thought those were the right characters to like give you the ick. So
yeah.
it was
enough.
Yeah,
to be
I kind of like, if I like how it's used in the story, I like the romance, I guess.
Yeah. All right, cool. Are we down for Strange New
Final
Worlds?
show.
All right.
So, this show is still ongoing, so this is just...
It's developing.
Yeah, 2 seasons into it. Just the first 20 episodes of Strange New Worlds. These are the romances we picked for the best of the show. What do we got?
All right.
Okay, so with Strange New Worlds, our best romances. You have Spock and T'Pring. Honorable mention of Pike and Vina. Okay, nice. So my TOS pick.
Yeah, we're bookending with them.
And then how lovely is that?
So your best romance for Strange New Worlds is Kirk and La'an, sorry.
Uh-huh.
And honorable mention Cybok and Angel.
Yes.
Okay.
Even though we've never seen them on screen together.
Headcanon over here. Okay.
That's not a headcanon. Like they say that in the episode. Like Angel is like trying to free her lover.
Okay. We'll see.
But then we find out at the end that it's Cybok. Or free their lover, sorry, but yeah, let me talk about Kirk and La'an real quick. I did not like Paul Wesley as Kirk in his first episode in season 1, A Quality of Mercy, the season finale. I was so disappointed in that casting. But then when I saw him in season 2, my favorite episode of Strange New Worlds to this day is still Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And I really bought into him and Christina Chong's chemistry. I loved them having that romantic adventure in modern day Toronto. And I think I really like the tragic romances we get in Strange New Worlds. Like I know like Spock and T'Pring are doomed, and Spock and Chapel are doomed, and then like Kirk and La'an, they're also, that relationship is kind of doomed from the get-go. And then like how it ties into Carol Marcus and David. But I love using the universe, using that time in Kirk's life. And I just like, I've really grown to love the character La'an on Strange New Worlds. And just the way that Christina Chong plays some of those like heartbreaking moments, like when she calls Kirk to make sure he's okay at the end of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And then after she keeps it together, she maintains her composure on like the Skype call with him. But then as soon as they hang up, she just starts bawling and crying. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, like I saved this guy, but like then later we learn like she can still never be with him. And it's so sad, and I totally buy into it. But tell us about Spock and T'Pring.
Okay, I know this one has failed. Like, it's going to not work. Obviously, we know.
Yeah.
But I really loved exploring this more than I thought, especially after season 1, episode 1 opened with very heavy Spock and T'Pring. I was like, ew, I don't want to see this at all. And then the more they started developing it, the more I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Like, I like seeing more of, like, the Vulcan, like, love.
Yeah.
Like, rituals, I would say. And
yeah, we get, like, Vulcan sexiness, Vulcan romance.
But, like, there's actual rituals, too, like, where he has to, like, impress her parents. And, like, there's this one, you know, where they're, like, doing this extreme mind meld. And, like, he... you know, she has to approve of him even in like the first episode. We're just getting more, I think. And I think that part is really cool. And I also think she's a really freaking cool person. Like her work is cool. And I think that it's neat that she's like, you know, kind of vouching for Spock as being half human very like many times.
She tries. Like
she does.
She tries so hard to make this relationship work. Like she hates him being like off in Starfleet, and you know, I feel so sorry for T'Pring.
Yeah.
Like, I can't blame her. I can't blame her for, like, you know, running off with Stan in a mock time.
But again, I think this comes down to I like her more than him in this relationship. And I just like I really am impressed by the effort that she puts into this, and I'm really disappointed in the lack of effort that Spock puts into it. But I do like seeing this develop, which is why I chose it as a best romance. So, honorable mentions?
Sure. You want to talk about Pike and Vina?
Yeah, so I know technically this happened in Discovery, but I thought since Pike is in Strange New Worlds, I would throw it into this slide because, yeah, I am excited to see more of this. And again, like knowing that that's kind of like his
We know
end
that's
game.
where he's going to end up.
Yeah, that's his end game. So
Yeah.
I'm excited. I love that they recast this actor or the Vina, and I'm just excited. I'm excited to see more of it, which is why I put it as an honorable mention.
And so with my honorable mention, Cybok and Angel, I really loved Captain Angel. I thought they were a cool antagonist for the show. And it was also kind of like a new thing to like having like this the sexy non-binary kind, gender queer, just like good representation in a role that we hadn't really seen other media put those types of characters in. And then tying that into Cybok, it is so bold. I said this like when Discovery premiered, and they're like, "Oh, Burnham is going to be part of Spock's family." And I'm like, wouldn't it be so bold if they brought back Cybok? But I bet they don't have the boldness to do it. They're not going to go bold hard enough. But with Strange New Worlds, they sure are. So it was that, and I also said, oh, they should give us Sam Kirk with a mustache. And Strange New Worlds gave us both the things that I was asking early Discovery to do. But yeah, like I love Cybok. I hope that we get him in season 3 or season 4, and I really hope that Captain Angel comes back because I want to explore more of those two characters and actually like see them together.
Cool.
But yeah, so our final slide: what are the worst romances in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds?
All right, here we go. So I chose Pike and Marie for Strange New World's worst romance, and Fatheree has T'Pril and Savette, which is funny. That's a good
Marie
one.
being Captain Battelle.
Captain Battelle. Sorry.
I actually forgot that her first name was Marie.
Oh,
but...
I was, because I love the musical episode so much, and he calls her Marie so
Yeah.
much. That's why I always say that in my head. And so for my honorable mention for worst romance, I have Spock and Chapel. And Fatheree has Pike and Allura.
Yeah, Allura being the character from Left Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach, who was okay with like torturing kids to death, so that their cloud cities stayed floating in the sky.
Yeah, that one was really bad. I forgot about that one.
Mainly just because I feel sorry for Pike, like going through that, but.
Commodore Trev in the comments says, always assumed that Marie's first name was Captain. That's really funny.
Nice.
Agree.
But yeah, T'Pril and Savette, I kind of have the problem with Strange New Worlds that I had with Prodigy, and that like I actually like most of the couples. Like I like exploring both Spock and T'Pring and Spock in Chapel, but I'm with T'Pril and Savette because I don't think they have a very healthy marriage. Like Savette wanted to like compliment Pike's preparation of some Vulcan cuisine, and then T'Pril was like, "Oh, gross! This has salt in it." And then he was like, "Oh, actually, I don't like it."
Yeah.
He has to kind of like cave to whatever her opinion is. So it's like, yeah, that's not a very good romance. But I don't really have much else to say. Tell us about Pike and Battelle, and then Spock and Chapel.
Yeah,
why are those bad?
Okay, I think Pike and Marie is forced. I don't really feel the chemistry between them. I feel like it's very awkward and crunchy a lot of times, and I don't know. I just have like a really hard time. And the first episode, like when we meet them and they're having breakfast together, I asked you if that was his sister. Like I was seriously like, who is this? Like it didn't read romantic to me like at all, and I'm still having a hard time with it. So I don't know. I'm just having a hard time.
It wasn't really romantic at first. They were more like very like casual friends with benefits.
It was just I don't know.
It was kind of like a season 2 thing when they kind of made them more emotional to each other.
And then she was like, had the whole thing where Una was on trial and was like she was on the defense, right?
She was the bad guy in that.
Yeah, and so I didn't super love that he went like he forgave, not that she was like she had a duty, like I understand that, but it would have been really hard I think to forgive that and like also still keep your number one and be supportive and on their side and then still date and see.
It's like right after that he's like, well, no hard feelings, let's get more serious in our relationship.
Yeah, I agree with is that Rachel? Drama Dork
Yeah.
884. I buy Pike and Marie more as friends with benefits. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I kind of think it worked better that way, and it kind of like gives the show writers more freedom because then they can like, oh, we want Pike to hook up with Allura in this episode,
Yeah.
and then like we can catch up with Battelle some other point in the future. I kind of liked that more as like the status quo than as the. But I know like they want to do something big for like their Gorney finale at the end of season 2, and who knows how that's going to resolve. So
She's
we're
gonna
still waiting
die.
for that. I don't think she is. I think they teased it too much. I think she's going to be fine. And
Okay.
maybe someone else will die.
We'll
But
see.
yeah, at some point this year we will know. So tell us why Spock and Chapel were your honorable mention.
This one I think is just because in the original series we just get little teases and little flirtations, and then in the animated series we get
they
Mud's
were your
passion.
bad pick in
They were
in
my
that
bad
too,
pick for
so.
that. And I think I just had a hard time in Strange New Worlds with them pushing this and developing this. I didn't want to see more of this because I think in the original series, like them being kind of standoffish and only having occasional interactions is believable, and then pushing more of this makes that less believable for me. And I think it bothers me that they want to explore this when we know that's not going to happen. And I also don't like that they were only really together seriously for like 3 or 4 episodes before she gets the fellowship thing, and then in the musical episode is they basically she dumps him. And I think like having her have like commitment issues and stuff is interesting. Like I like that for her, but I don't like that it's dragging Spock along. Like I think especially like with him being like a Vulcan and like kind of suppressing a lot of his emotions, and then we're seeing him being more human in these episodes, like showing more emotions and stuff with her.
Then Boimler they're going back in time and being like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
This isn't right.
Yeah, and I just felt like it was just kind of weird, and I was having a hard time with it. Like I love both of these characters individually, but I just didn't really like this romance.
Yeah, I like it. I like the drama. I like when I like their chemistry, but I like when Spock gets mad and punches a wall and is all like freaking out, and I don't know. It almost seemed like she was like kind of like scared of it, but kind of like excited by it at the same time. And it's interesting trying to square this with like the things that Spock and Chapel say and do in the original series. That's another thing I'm looking forward to is when Strange New World is all said and done, and we can like put all these things, line them all up on the timeline together and connect the dots, and how will things line up. But like when it's all said and done, we get all the Spock and Chapel stories we're ever going to get, and we can like chart that whole relationship all the way from Strange New Worlds of the animated series. It'll be fun to kind of look at the big picture of that. But yeah, I can see why it's not something you're particularly into. Like I think some people agree with you. Aaron has pointed out that we know Corby will be in the picture. They're going to get engaged. At some point this Dr. Corby scientist and Chapel will get engaged, and we'll see how Spock reacts to that. But I guess he's going to get re-engaged to Pring. So a lot of engagements happening in season 3 of Strange New Worlds. It sounds
or further, depending on when they want to explore pushing those into.
Or
engagements.
Season 4. Hopefully we get a Strange New World season 5. I'd like it to have a 5-year mission like Lower Decks and Discovery both got, but we will see. But
all right,
that is all that we have. So thank you everyone for watching live. Those of you that are here with us now, and thank you everyone else watching or listening to this later. Well, that was a long show, but this is like a Valentine's Day special. So.
Thanks for sticking around.
We're going to be back next week, though. Miss Taylor is going to be back on the show. Folks might recall a few months ago, we got Taylor's first time Star Trek takes on about like the first half of the Star Trek franchise. At that time, you'd seen all of the original series, animated series, TNG, but we were still working on Voyager and Deep Space Nine. You've now seen the entire franchise.
Yeah.
So next week we're going to do a really fun show. Taylor is going to give her first time Trek takes on the Berman era. Now that someone who watched all of the Berman era for the first time in the year 2024, the year of the Bell Riots and the Irish reunification.
Right.
neither of which happened because of pesky Romulan time travel, I guess, that we know about from Strange New Worlds. But speaking of Strange New Worlds, the week after next week, you're going to talk about the modern Star Trek era. You saw all episodes of all 5 modern Alex Kurtzman era Star Trek shows just over like the last few months. So you got caught up real fast. I really want to ask you some questions and I know other people will be curious to get your first time Trek takes on that. So that's what we're doing the next couple of weeks. But again, thank you everyone who was able to join us live, and thank you everyone else watching or listening later. We're going to go ahead and sign off, but happy Valentine's Day. And until next time, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at Tex-Trek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.